I found a. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Water Resource Agency Board of Directors meeting. I call this meeting to order. Can I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair. John Bailey.
Here.
Mike Labar. Here. Mark Gonzalez.
Here.
Deirdre Sullivan. Here. Ken Eklund.
Here.
Mike Scatini. Jason Smith. Matt Simus. Marvin Borzini.
Thank you, Eva. Is there any public comment on closed session items?
No hands raised.
Very good. Thank you very much. I will now.
Chair, I will be pulling presentation item 4, the summary of the Castroville Seawater Intrusion Project 2023 operational season.
Okay.
We will reconvene that in February.
Okay. We will now recess to closed session and reconvene at or around 1 p.m. Thank you.
See the microphones that are on.
Mic check. It's loud. Mic check. 1 2 1 2. Mic check. Huh. Mic check. 1 2 3. Mic check. 1 2 1 3. Mic check. 1 2 3. Mic check. Mic check. 1 2 3. Mic check.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Water Resource Agency Board of Directors meeting. We will reconvene at 1:14. Kelly, is there anything reportable from closed session?
No reportable items, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, I
yes.
also will be pulling presentation item 4, summary of the Castroville Seawater Intrusion Projects 2023 operational seasons from agenda this month.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. If everybody will rise and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, election of officers. We appointed a subcommittee last meeting, and Deidre Sullivan headed that. So Deidre, if you want to take over from now for me, please, and come up with your findings.
The committee met, and we were following kind of a seniority process, and we nominate Director LeBaire to be chair and Director Simons to be co-chair for the next 2 years.
Very good. That needs to be voted on. Do I have any other comments or additions or subtractions?
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion to go with the nominating committee's recommendation.
I've got Ken with a motion.
Second.
Who's that?
Jason.
Busy guy.
Oh, we have a question here?
Oh, question? Yeah, Marvin.
Since I'm behind the curve, can you be extended as an option? Can you,
If they bump my pay, I guess so.
I mean, are you available to continue on or not?
I have served 3 years, one serving Richard Ortiz's last term. I served my 2 terms, and as bylaws state, we have a election year, and that is, so we appointed a subcommittee, and the subcommittee came up. My name wasn't in the roster, so there wasn't that I said no. It just, we're bringing new blood in. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So I've got a motion by Ken, a second by Jason. Public have any questions or comments about the motion?
No hands raised.
Very good. Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations. And
All right. I would like to offer up our outgoing chair. If you'd like to say any comments, any words?
it's been a pleasure. I hope I didn't drive too many people crazy, but it's been a pleasure to serve this board.
Thank you, John. And I just want to express my appreciation to the board for this opportunity to serve in this capacity, and I hope I do you justice. And congratulations, Matt. Would you like to say any words?
No, thank you. I'm looking forward to the next couple of years.
All right, given that, we'll now move on to public comment. Is there any member of the public who speak on any item that is not on the agenda? Again, I'll ask, is there any member of the public speak on any item not on the agenda?
No hands raised.
Thank you. We'll now move on. Presentations, item number 2, the 2023 August Trow groundwater elevation contours. And this will be Guillermo.
Hi. Let me share my screen. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Well, good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. My name is Guillermo Diaz, and I'm a hydrologist at the Water Resources Agency. Today, I'm going to give an update on the 2023 August Trough Groundwater Level Program. This update was presented to the Basin Management Advisory Committee on January 3rd. Activities associated with this program are funded by Funds 111 and 116 and are included in each year's budget. These activities can be linked to strategic plan goals B7 and E1. Before we look at the contours, I wanted to show this map that displays all the wells that are in our groundwater level programs. This includes the monthly program, August Trough, and annual programs. All of these efforts are ongoing so that we can continue to monitor the health of the basin, evaluate different projects, and then help develop basin management strategies. So, what are groundwater elevation contours? These are lines on a map that represent equal lines of groundwater levels or elevations relative to mean sea level. The shape and spacing of these lines can indicate what groundwater surface looks like. For example, if the lines are closer together, it indicates that there's a steeper gradient in the groundwater surface. And on the other hand, if the lines are further apart, you'll have a much gentler slope. Thanks to these contours, we can also determine the general direction of groundwater flow, which is always going to be perpendicular to the contour line and from a higher elevation to a lower elevation. So now we move on to the August Trough survey. This survey is done to create the August Trough groundwater elevation contours, and it's done in a single day in August, where staff goes out and sample around 140 wells from the coast to Chular. We consider this survey to be a snapshot of the groundwater level conditions in an area that is in and around the seawater intrusion front at a time of the year when the aquifers are most stressed from pumping. So first, here we have our 180 foot and east side shallow aquifer set of contours. The red lines are our 10-foot increment groundwater elevation contours for 2023. As we walk through the next slides, I will highlight some areas and add the 2022 set of contour lines in blue for comparison. Starting near the coast, we saw levels increase between 4 and 7 feet from where they were last year. And as such, the -10 and -20 lines have moved inland. But despite this increase, the groundwater elevations are still below the sea level at the coast. In the east side, we saw an increase between 5 and 15 feet. And moving up valley, we saw increases between 10 and 20 feet from last year in wells between Salinas and Chular. We can see how this line have moved down valley from last year. As I mentioned before, we can determine the general direction of groundwater flow with these lines, as shown with the blue arrows. Here you can see that groundwater flow would generally move from the coast and the river towards that trough located in the northeast of Salinas. Now for our 400 and east side deep aquifer set of contours. Starting at the coast again, we saw increases of 10 feet around the lagoon and between 10 to 20 feet towards the Castroville area. As a result, the -20 and -30 lines have also moved inland, and we get to see the -10 line again. This means that groundwater elevations are around 10 feet below the sea level at the coast. Moving towards the Espinosa Lake area, we saw even larger increases between 30 to 35 feet. You can see how the trough that we were seeing last year has drastically diminished. On the east side area, we saw a lessening of the east side trough with increases between 10 and 15 feet. And then finally, we saw increases of 12 to 25 feet between Salinas and Chular, with those lines moving down valley, indicating a recovery in groundwater storage in that area. For this set of contours, we see a similar general direction of groundwater flow from the coast and the Salinas River towards the northeast of Salinas. And to summarize, for the 180 and east side shallow set of contours, we saw an increase near the coast of 4 to 7 feet, a lessening of the east side trough and the area north of Salinas by 5 to 15 feet, and an increase in elevations at valley of 10 to 20 feet. And for the 400 and east side deep set of contours, we saw increases at the coast that range from 10 feet near the river, 10 to 20 feet towards Castroville, and 30 to 35 feet in the area north of Espinosa Lake, as well as a lessening of the east side trough by 10 to 15 feet, and an increase in elevations at valley of 12 to 25 feet. And that is all I have for you today. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Guillermo. Board of Directors, any questions or comments at this time? Mr. Chair. Yes.
Yes, Guillermo, thank you for that was a terrific presentation. Could you go back to the page before last? There's, with the arrows, it showed the arrows.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I think I've asked this question before, but I mean, it appears that the lowest depression in the groundwater levels, there's something going on there. But where I'm seeing that on the east side, I'm not that familiar with the operation, but is that a geological feature that's causing that to happen? Because it doesn't seem like there's enough pumping over there to do that. Can you answer that question?
My understanding is that it is a geological feature. We do have two faults right on the north part of the Salinas, and they're displayed in these dashed lines. But Amy Woodrow may have some more information.
Yeah, thank you, Guillermo. You covered it well. That is a big part of it. I think the other component that we're seeing there, Director Eklund, is just related to some of the differences in recharge in the east side. Again, due largely to the geology, it is slower to recharge in that area, particularly in the lower part of each side of that kind of that layer that's equivalent to the 400-foot aquifer. So there are a few different things going on there.
Thank you.
Board of Directors, any other comments or questions? Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the report. First off is, going in August, agriculture is using water probably 7 days a week. So how do you make a determination whether that pump was just turned off or not? And do you see a difference with the wells that have the pressure transducers, and trying to kind of weed out some of the data there with by using the pressure transducer and then looking at a well that may be close by and seeing if there's a discrepancy in that, and trying to get to more of a scientific number?
Yes, so that's the reason why we do it on a Sunday. That way, most of the wells are not operating. And then we also look at the trends. We check that the values make sense. Usually, wells in an area tend to act in a similar way. So we discard any data that seemed like it was a pumping signal.
Yeah, I guess Sunday doesn't really matter in agriculture. Plants don't know that it's Sunday, that it's a day off. So
okay.
Farming is farming. We do it 7 days a week, 365 days a week. But but again, looking at the differences between a transducer and a well versus just a well where you're going in and looking at the elevation, are you seeing much of a discrepancy on those?
No, not really. We do check our network of pressure transducers, and there's usually a similar trend with both wells.
Okay, all right. And in looking at the maps and just the contours and kind of to what Ken was saying, I'm glad that you pointed out that there's some fault lines in that area, because obviously farming in those areas really hasn't changed probably in the last few decades, other than maybe being more efficient with water and a better steward of that resource. So I also look at the fact that the majority of the growth in Salinas is up in that area, and how much of the natural permeability of that soil is being inhibited because we're putting houses all over the top of it and putting roads. I know that Director Gonzalez is he likes that cement that allows for the water to flow through, and I question whether we would be seeing some of the drops in elevation if maybe we had been utilizing that cement years ago.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from directors?
One more quick general one. I mean, for my novice hydrology, obviously after 3 years of drought, I would expect that we would see this after the rainfall that we had last year. My question is, what would you, historically, in looking at the groundwater and how permeable it is or isn't and all of that stuff, do you think if we had 2 more wet years after that, like if we had 3 successive years, would you continue to see the same gain, or is there a max of that capacity to take in water, if that makes any sense?
Well, I don't think there's a max per se, but it does slow down. As soon as the soil gets wet, its capacity to absorb more water, it slows down. So if we have more wet years in a row, we'll see an increase, but it won't be as drastic as what we saw this last year.
All right, thank you. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item? And I'll ask, is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item?
No hands raised.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. We'll now move on to item 3, presentation.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Yes.
One more. Are you looking at any of the city wells and what their wells are doing, their groundwater?
We do. We get data from the city wells.
Okay.
All right. And with that, we'll move on to item 3, or 2023 seawater intrusion contours. This will be Amy Woodrow.
Good afternoon, Chair Labar and Directors. Amy Woodrow, Senior Hydrologist. I'm going to share my screen here with you and go through some slides to look at the 2023 the seawater intrusion contour maps. Just in terms of finances and strategic plan, these are similar to the groundwater level program. These activities are funded in Funds 111 and 116 and are connected to the agency's strategic plan and goal related to using and sharing data for decision-making purposes. Just a little background refresher in terms of, to kind of describe what we're measuring when we are making these seawater intrusion contours. The native groundwater in the 180 and 400-foot aquifers has a chloride level at about 50 milligrams per liter, and seawater has a concentration of about 19,000 milligrams per liter of chloride. So as seawater is intruding into the groundwater basin, there's a mixing that happens in what we term the transition zone. And while what we map is at the 500 milligram per liter chloride, there are measurements with a range of values of chloride that we're measuring. So wells, in areas closer to the coast that have been intruded for a longer period of time tend to have a much higher chloride concentration. Wells near that advancing front of the seawater intrusion front are closer to that 500 range. So there's sort of a gradient that we're measuring. And the well locations that we monitor as part of the water quality, this coastal water quality program, are shown on the map here. There are some in the 180-foot aquifer, others in the 400-foot aquifer, and they are a range of different well types. Some are privately owned agricultural wells, others are urban water supply wells, and the agency also has a small network of what we call dedicated monitoring wells that are just for water quality and groundwater level purposes. So there's a spread in terms of location across the area. So we're measuring concentrations both behind the seawater intrusion front and in front of it. And I'm not going to step through all of these. I think you probably have seen these in the past in presentations that TAM has given. But just to kind of put in the context that we are not just looking at a single data point as part of this water quality analysis, but there are a number of these different geochemical tools where we're looking at, different relationships between cations and anions and different, things in the water quality. So it's not just the chloride that we're looking at, but it's kind of this suite of tools that are also coupled with well construction data, groundwater extraction data, the groundwater level contours. So all of this data is kind of put together as part of the analysis process that goes into developing these seawater intrusion maps. And this will kind of get into the meat of things here. The first maps we're going to look at are the seawater intrusion in the 180-foot aquifer. This figure is very zoomed out. I just want to orient you to a couple of things before I get into the 2023 data in particular. But the sort of color gradient, these blue colors that you see are the oldest data points we have. And the colors move forward toward kind of hotter orange and red colors for the more recent data. The question mark, the areas with gray question marks are places that the agency does not have monitoring locations. So we just don't have wells there. So we don't have a great handle on what's happening in those particular spots. And then the other thing I want to draw your attention to is the dashed line, the black dashed line that's kind of filled in with the gray hash marks. That area reflects the zone that is at a 250 milligram per liter chloride line. So the colors are the 500 line, that gray hashed area in front of it is the 250 line. And the significance of that is that, once we've hit that 250 line, it's already 5 times over the background levels. And there is a significance for drinking water, as in terms of drinking water standards at that 250 milligram per liter line. So there's a lot of information on these maps. This next one, more zoomed in, I just want to show you the change of what we mapped as kind of the new intruded area in 2023. So there are 2 little lobes there. It's kind of a dark maroony brown color. So those are the areas where we saw advancement in 2023. And I do want to note that, it was not kind of like a sudden leap forward to 500 milligrams per liter. You can see it's been a number of years since we've had some movement in the 180-foot aquifer. What's been happening in these 2 areas is chloride levels have been slowly increasing from year to year. And this year they just did cross that 500 milligram per liter line, which is why they're now showing up on that colored part of the map. And we also, as part of these products every year, put out a bar graph showing the acres of intruded area in the aquifer that are kind of overlaying any of the area that's been mapped as intruded. The change we saw for this year was the addition of 73 additional acres of land that are now underlying or overlaying an intruded area. So the next map we're going to look at is for the 400-foot aquifer. Similar, areas marked on here with the areas where we were kind of missing some data. And also this does include the 250 milligram per liter line. And just as a refresher, in the 400-foot aquifer, we have a couple different things going on. There's what we call the regional seawater intrusion, where it's, ocean water moving inward from the coast. Then we also have those islands of vertical migration where it is impaired water from the 180-foot aquifer that is moving vertically downward into the 400-foot aquifer. So we'll zoom in here again for the changes that we saw in 2023. We're located around this large island of seawater intrusion. So a little area on the sort of the eastern edge, and then a little bit of advancement on the southern tip right along Blanco Road. So those are the changes that we saw in the 400-foot aquifer in 2023. There was no mapped advancement on the main sort of regional body of the front there. And a similar acreage map. I know it's difficult to see the numbers here, but what we're looking at for this year is an added 49 acres of land that are overlying the impaired groundwater. So just a quick summary. In the 180-foot aquifer, we saw some advancement along that intruded lobe. And then in the 400-foot aquifer, some expansion around the island. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Amy. Board of Directors?
Yep, I've got one, and this is more of a comment than anything, Amy. There are, well, I mean, with your pictures that you put up, it shows colors from the coastline all the way in toward 183 Davis Road, so on and so forth. It gives perception that all those wells are contaminated. There are wells out there that don't have the chlorides that you're stating, that still have good water out there.
Yes, I agree. That is true.
Yeah, it isn't like the whole, you paint and with a big brush that it's all this way. It's not that way. There's quite a few wells out there that have good water at different elevations. It just tells you how fickle this aquifer it is, that where the seawater is and where the seawater isn't. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
No, I appreciate the comment. I think what we're trying to depict with these maps is largely the kind of the large regional picture of what is generally happening. But you're right, on a parcel by parcel basis, there is always variation.
I think other board members.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Director Bailey said, it paints a grim picture, and it sounds off the alarm bells. We're more than willing to show the blobs of salt water in the 400-foot aquifer. We should be showing the blobs of fresh water as well to be scientifically accurate, right? To try to get a better understanding of what's really going on there, and for public perception. Because to Director Bailey's point, there is water that is a rock throw away from the ocean. There are wells that you can throw a rock at and hit a wave that have perfectly good water. But by this map, it shows that it's completely intruded. So I think in the future that we should be trying to be a little bit more accurate in how we deliver this to the public.
Other board members?
Amy, quick question on the island that we've seen a lot of rapid movement on over the last 5 years or so. Did we actually, and very minimal this past year, were there wells, since we had all this well destruction, were there some of those in that area that were destructed that may have helped mitigate that?
There were some wells destroyed in that area, yes, so that is likely part of it. I think another thing that we need to remember that's happening out there is there are some areas where the clay layer between the 180 and the 400-foot aquifer is thin or missing in some cases altogether. So that's something that we will not ever be able to do anything about. That's just the way those layers were formed. But I think it is, destroying wells that are cross-contaminating and allowing that movement is part of the puzzle, and it is something that we can do something about. So it's kind of all moving in the right direction, I think, as part of that grant-funded project.
Ken?
Yes. Hi, Amy. Thank you for the presentation. Let me ask, go back to Director Schettini's question. Is there any approach, is there any kind of way to show what he was talking about? In other words, you've got a situation where a particular well is actually very good. I mean, is it just a few wells that are like that, or is there any way you could do little contours for that? I mean, I understand we don't have a perfect picture underground, but is there any way to actually show what Director Schettini was talking about?
I would have to think about how, we would do that. We certainly have, specific data associated with given wells. There is also an issue with having a sufficient amount of data to be able to, if I were to put one data point on a map that has good water quality, I may not have enough information to make a good assessment of how far from that well, does that good water quality extend. So I understand the desire to have those things called out, and it's certainly something that we can think about folding in, but I think it will be difficult to, add, depict sort of smaller islands of fresh water and know how far it extends and how deep it goes as well. That would be a challenge at least with the network that we have right now.
Thank you.
Any other board members? Right.
I think the issue is that these maps direct policy, and if you're going to create policy, if I was a layman coming into this and just took a look at these maps without having a clear understanding of everything that's going on in these things, I would say, oh my God, we've got to stop pumping. There is absolutely no fresh water, and this is devastating. It's a tsunami of salt water under the ground, and it's not the case. So I think it's really important that we put out the best science possible and paint a clear, true picture of really what's going on under there. Also, I just kind of wanted to point out that if you look at when CSIP and when the SRDF came online, it had an impact. Those projects had an impact. Did it stop it completely? No, it didn't stop it completely. But it slowed down the process, the progression of saltwater intrusion. And I would probably have to argue that if the valley as a whole did not also not go through all the changes that it has throughout all the years, how much better would these lines be? Every municipality in the valley has grown. Agriculture has grown. Everything has grown in this valley that has changed the demand for water throughout this whole valley, which impacts the seawater intrusion. So the fact that this thing is that these projects have had the impact that it has with the growth in the valley is tremendous.
Mr. Chair? Yeah. Just adding, Amy, I've been looking at these maps for 25 years, how far intrusion's been coming in. For us, that's fine, but it's a flawed map, and it doesn't state anywhere, and I'm going to reiterate what Mike just said, is the general public doesn't understand. And I think we need to rethink this map on how we present it, because going back to 1944, 1975, or 1985, some of those wells in that area have gotten actually better water quality after the CSIP project went online. So using the same map over year after year after year, I think we need to rethink. It's a good map. It's been a good map, but I think it needs to be rethought and presented in a different way. Not to be so opinionated. I mean, it gives you an opinion looking at it. But as a layperson that, oh my God, we've got to give up all that ground. Let's just quit farming it. So let's think about that, how we can present it in a better way. Like I said, the area has changed. The 12,000 acres in CSIP have changed. So let's see what we can do. Thank you.
All right, and all good points. I think at a minimum, having some footnotes suggesting the well conditions could be X amount moved better, X amount moved worse. But can staff have that discussion and look at maybe bringing this back to as a future agenda item for the board to discuss? Thank you. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item? Can I ask any member of the public who would like to speak on this item?
No hands raised.
Thank you, Eva. We'll now move on to our, as Eva had mentioned, our item number 4 presentation will be moved to the February meeting, so we'll move on to the consent calendar. Item 5. Any member want to pull any of the items from the consent calendar?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from December 18th.
Okay, we have first with Bailey, second with Samus. Is there any member of the public like to speak on this item? Again, I'll ask any member of the public like to speak on this item. Hearing and seeing none. Bring this back. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you, everyone. Passes unanimously.
Mr. Chair, I'll have to abstain. I wasn't at the December meeting.
Thank you. 1 abstain. Now move on to item number 6, action items. Consider recommending that the Board of Supervisors adopt a resolution authorizing execution of funding agreement with the California Department of Water Resources for Nacimiento and San Antonio Safety of Dam projects. And this will go to Elise Ramirez.
First timer. Okay, there we go. Good afternoon, Board. Elise Ramirez, Senior Water Resources Engineer, here to present on today's action to consider recommending the Monterey County Water Resources Agency Board of Supervisors adopt a resolution authorizing execution of a funding agreement with the California Department of Water Resources for Nacimiento and San Antonio Safety of Dam projects, and authorize the general manager and his designees to accept, execute, and deliver any and all documents necessary or advisable in order to effectuate the purposes of the resolution. Prior Board of Directors actions on February 16th, 2021, the Monterey County Water Resources Agency Board of Directors voted to recommend the Monterey County Water Resources Board of Supervisors authorize the agency's general manager to enter into a grant funding agreement with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to receive a $17 million grant for the construction of a fish exclusion system for the Interlake Tunnel construction. On March 2nd, 2021, the Monterey County Board of Supervisors authorized to enter into that agreement, and the agreement was executed. Some background, on November 7th, 2023, the Board of Directors received an update on the status of the Interlake Tunnel projects. I'm not going to get into too many details there, but I will mention that the Interlake Tunnel project construction is several years from commencing. The fish screens, which is what the fish exclusion system will be, is likely to be an end of construction activity, so later in the phase of construction itself. The 2023 Budget Act does allow for the utilization of these funds for projects that are more near term at either Nacimiento or San Antonio reservoirs. On October 6, 2023, a meet and confer took place to propose a transfer of use of these funds to Nacimiento and San Antonio Safety of Dam projects. On October 16th, 2023, a formal request to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee to transfer the $17 million funds from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to the Department of Water Resources followed and was submitted for the use of funds for Nacimiento and San Antonio Safety of Dam projects. Some next steps, a new funding agreement does need to be executed with the California Department of Water Resources, and the Monterey County Water Resources Agency will be required to notify DWR of the projects determined to move forward for the funding, submit quarterly reports, project schedules, a work plan, and all deliverables per the terms of the agreement. A draft agreement was included in your packet, so if you had a chance to review. The agency does anticipate utilizing the funds for the following dam safety projects. One is the Nacimiento Dam Plunge Pool Project, the construction phase specifically, and San Antonio Dam Spillway Replacement Project, the design phase specifically. Just a very brief overview of the Nacimiento Dam Plunge Pool Erosion Protection, or RCC, which is Roller Compacted Concrete Slope Protection Project. The planning, design, and permitting for this project are currently underway, and active phases are funded partially by the $6.1 million grant received from the California Department of Water Resources for Nacimiento Dam. An estimated $14 million of the $17 million to be entered into this agreement will go towards the Nacimiento Dam Plunge Pool Project construction phase, like I said, specifically. This portion of the project, or the construction itself, is anticipated to occur in fiscal year 25-26. And a brief update on the San Antonio, or not update, but how the funds will be used for the San Antonio Dam Spillway Replacement Project. A design alternatives analysis is currently underway for this project and is anticipated to be received early February. This will be a draft form, so the phase to be entered into next will be design. An estimated $3 million of this $17 million will be transferred, or is the portion of the agreement that is anticipated for use on this project. Commencement for the design phase is anticipated in the spring once the alternatives analysis is finalized, so that's why it's springtime. The fiscal impact for this, it will be received as reimbursement payments, so the agency will need to front until the reimbursements are received per the project schedules and the terms of the agreement. The estimated revenue will be entered into the recommended budget. Let me just catch my breath. So today's action will be consider recommending the Monterey County Water Resources Agency Board of Supervisors adopt a resolution authorizing the execution of a funding agreement with the California Department of Water Resources for Nacimiento and San Antonio Safety of Dam projects, and authorize the general manager and his designees to accept, execute, and deliver any and all documents necessary or advisable in order to effectuate the purposes of the resolution.
Thank you, Elise. Board members, comments? Ken?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. The question I have, because it's a little confusing to me, there's been several changes. We got, so if we don't build the Interlake Tunnel, because we got $10 million to do the initial stuff for that, and we need to have some kind of a assessment vote on that. If the Interlake Tunnel project doesn't go ahead, do we have to pay the state back?
No, because it's a transfer of funds, so it would go to the Department of Water Resources.
Gotcha. Okay, so this move over, okay, that's really nice and clean. Thank you.
Any other board members, questions or comments? Is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item? Again, I'll ask any member of the public who would like to speak on this item. Is there anyone online?
No hands raised.
Hearing and seeing none, I'll bring this back to the board for action.
Mr. Chair, I move to staff's recommendation.
Second.
Okay, first with Eklund, second with Gonzalez. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Against? Abstain. Thank you, everyone. Passes unanimously. We'll move on to item 7, approve amendment number 2 to the agreement for services with Industrial Machine Shop. And this will go to Jason.
Yes, thank you. Let me share my screen. Okay. All right, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. As previously stated, the item before you today is to consider approving Amendment 2 to the Agreement for Services with Industrial Machine Shop to increase the dollar amount by $250,000 for a new contract total not to exceed $540,000 for machining, fabrication, and repair services related to agency facilities and equipment, and authorize the general manager to execute the agreement. Due to the immediate need for these services and the time constraints related to that, this item has not gone to committee before coming to the board. But the board has seen this contract in the past. On April 18th, 2022, the board approved Amendment 1 to the Agreement for Services with Industrial Machine Shop, which extended the contract term to June 30th, 2027, and increased the amount by $200,000 at that time for a new contract total not to exceed $290,000 for machining, fabrication, and repair services related to agency facilities and equipment. The financial impact to Amendment 2 of Amendment 2 is not to exceed $250,000 to be spent across the agreement term, which ends June 30th, 2027. Primarily will be coming from agency funds 111, 122, and 131, with potential FEMA reimbursement related to for some of the expenses related to the 2023 storm events. And then because it is an on-call contract, there could be work that's performed in other agency funds as needed. The previous expenditures with Industrial Machine Shop include $105,000 in fiscal year 22, $36,000 in fiscal year 23, and then fiscal year 24 to date, we've spent about $119,000. We have another $45,000 pending related to the Santa Rita pump station repair. And most of the expenses that we have accrued in fiscal year 24 were related to the winter of 2023 storm repairs. And a good portion of those will be FEMA reimbursable. So if you're not familiar with Industrial Machine Shop, it's a local company based out of Salinas that provides on-call services related to machining, fabrication, repair of pumps, valves, and motors. And they have extensive experience in older pump repair, like the equipment that we're currently using in our agency systems now. They have a proven track record repairing our agency flood conveyance equipment, and because of their familiarity with the equipment and their geographic location, they're able to provide really quick responses for our time-sensitive repairs. And this is an on-call contract, as I mentioned, so there will be additional services into the future, but our immediate needs for this agreement include the Santa Rita pump station repairs that I mentioned previously, the $45,000, and then repair of a 200 horsepower lower merit flood pump motor and fabrication of stainless steel trash racks for the Potrero tide gates structure. And then any emergency repairs that may result from winter of 2024 storms. So once again, the item before you today is to consider approving Amendment 2 to the Agreement for Services with Industrial Machine Shop to increase the dollar amount by $250,000 for a new contract total not to exceed $540,000 for machining, fabrication, and repair services related to agency facilities and equipment, and authorize the general manager to execute the agreement.
All right, thank you, Jason. Board of Directors, any questions or comments on this item? Is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item? Again, I'll ask any member of the public like to speak on this item. Do we have anyone online?
No hands raised.
Hearing and seeing none, I'll bring this back to board for action.
Move to approve.
Okay. First with the Gonzalez, second with Simus. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Against? Abstain. Thank you, everyone. Passes unanimously. Move on to item 8, key information and calendar events, which was in our packet. Is there any questions or comments on any of those items?
Yes, Chair. JBL, the Joint Board Leadership Committee meeting, will be canceled for January 18th and will be set for Thursday, February 15th.
Thank you.
Of February.
Any board members, questions or comments? All right, hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to item 9, the General Manager's Report. Ara?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll begin my report with the personnel updates for the month. So under engineering and dam safety section, we are currently planning on interviews for 2 water resource engineers positions that we are currently advertising for, and so those interviews will get scheduled for later this month. Also in that area, we have open a solicitation for an associate engineer. That was originally scheduled to close at the beginning of the month, but just due to the timeliness of that solicitation, we thought it best to extend it out further and beyond the holiday season, when not everybody may have been wanting to fill out a job application. So. Under maintenance, we had a number of applications submitted for 2 maintenance workers positions that we're looking for. Those are in the screening process, and interviews will be scheduled soon. And then under operations in our environmental shops, we have openings for hydrologists and water resources technician to backfill departures or promotions that have occurred in the past few months. And then lastly, under our administrative section, we have our new Office Assistant 3, Janelle Ramirez, joining us today. Janelle, you want to raise your hand and wave to everybody? And so she'll be working with Giselle and the rest of that team. So, yeah, welcome. And so that would be my personnel update. Moving on to dam safety funding, I had included in the package a memo that had been prepared in cooperation with the county's advocacy team for our 2024 asks of the state and federal legislature. I focused on dam safety funding primarily for this report. The main thing that's new in there is a request for funding over 3 fiscal years for low-level outlet works modernization at San Antonio Dam, and so we've broken that out and over time in consideration of the state's current fiscal situation, and are hopeful if there are opportunities for funding, bringing it down into smaller bite-sized pieces might make us more competitive. The other area that we will continue to press on, this is a continuation of last year's request, is for funding for replacement wells within the CSIP project, and so that also remains on our list. And so those are our funding report.
Any questions there?
Moving on to Monterey One Water and our reconciliation effort, there is a lot going on there. The financial audit, we had originally thought we would be receiving a draft report in December. However, there were some materials that the auditors had asked M1 to be able to provide, and it took some while to be able to gather that up. It went back a number of years, and the complexity of the request required some additional time, and so we were more than happy to make that available to M1. That material has since been provided, and the auditors are going through it. So the new anticipated time frame for a draft report would be by the end of this month, and so we look forward to receiving that and seeing what is to be said. Expecting each agency to take about a month to review and comment, and so that puts us somewhere in the March, perhaps April timeframe in terms of receiving a final report, and we will have the auditors come and present that report to y'all when the time is right. On the water operations assessment, we are continuing to have anomalies in the water metering data, discrepancies between what the physical meters are reading, what the electronic information is recording, and what's getting transmitted to the SCADA system. Staff been working on these for a couple of months now, trying to resolve these issues. And I think, well, I don't think, and we are at a point now where it makes sense for us to bring in a contractor that can, you know, resolve these issues on an expedited basis. So we've requested E2, who we've been working with on the hydrodynamic modeling. They have these abilities, and so we've requested that they prepare a scope of work, and we anticipate receiving that next week. And so we will continue to press there. The downside to these delays, of course, is that currently in terms of hydrodynamic modeling results, which are then intended to inform not only the operations piece of the equation, but also the engineering improvement side of the equation. You know, at best, we're looking at April of '24 for output, and if we, you know, really need to rely on peak deliveries, we may think it best to go through another irrigation season, which would put us in September of '24. And so that does challenge us in terms of time. There are some grant funding dollars that are on a clock and ticking for projects that we would like to do out there, and so we are sensitive to the time piece of it, but that is where we are. In terms of the request for SCADA telemetry, we did recently receive from M1 an access portal to that information, so we're shifting into the beta testing phase of that work, and so it'll be looking forward to seeing how that all pans out. Also, since we last met, the agency and M1 Water received a letter from the Salinas Valley Basin Alliance and the Salinas Valley Water Coalition. In essence, you know, thanking us for the work that we are doing now, but also requesting that we get together and do an accounting of source supplies. I did have an opportunity to meet with Mr. Asciutto last week, and we did discuss the letter among other things, and have decided that we think the best first step would be to meet with the Alliance and Coalition representatives to better understand what they are of asking from us, and so that we can, you know, prepare a good joint response that is responsive to their queries. So we'll be looking forward to doing that in the coming weeks. Also related to the CSIP project, this reconciliation effort, a while back, the Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency had applied for and has received grant funding to support a facilitator, a gentleman named Dave Sipos with Sacramento State University, to help with the discussions about all of the issues that we're trying to reconcile here, but also to help prepare for and conduct public workshops with the aim really of helping to develop a common understanding of CSIP and the relationships of the agencies and how we all fit towards, you know, the goals as they relate to the Salinas Valley Basin's goals of managing the 18400 aquifer. And so that work is just beginning now. And I believe his first steps are intended to be interviewing staff and trying to get an understanding of the lay of the land, and then, you know, having that all work out to these workshops to help promote a common understanding of CSIP. And then lastly, with respect to all of this, we had discussed preparing a preventative maintenance and capital improvement and replacement plan. And so we are preparing, in talking this over with Kelly, sort of an informal solicitation for proposals, not wanting to go through a formal process because of the time that could be involved with that. But we do want to certainly get input from, you know, some of the folks that are capable of doing this work. And so, so we'll be looking forward to having something to consider, hopefully by the February meeting, so we can move forward with that.
Any questions or comments on that item?
Then lastly, on the Aqua update, I included a memo, really touches on three things. It reports out that the Aqua Board of Directors took action to name their 2024-25 committee members. And so I listed out who all from the Water Resources Agency will be participating on what committee there. And so that'll be a fun new horizon for us. Also in that memo, I note that Aqua is looking for someone who is willing to sit on the Region 5 board. And so there's information provided there in terms of, what the requirements would be. And so if anyone's interested in working at that level and in that sphere, let me know, and happy to move on. If someone from this board does want to be a part of that, we would have to work through, it does require a supporting resolution. We'd have to work through that detail, but nonetheless. And then lastly, as it relates to the committee memberships, the Association of California Water Agencies does do an annual Washington, D.C. trip. That's scheduled for February. As we just recently rejoined, it isn't something we as an agency have prepared for, and so, we're likely a pass on that. But certainly if one of the directors feels inclined to attend, it is a first-come, first-served basis. But it can be a very interesting trip. If any of you are interested in doing that, let me know, and we'll pass that information along.
All right, thank you, Ara. Any questions on that? Any member of the public have any questions on the general manager's report? Can I ask any questions from the public? Hearing and seeing none. We'll move to item 10, committee reports. Before we start, during the addendum item, there was also the committee assignments. I was thinking that this would be an appropriate place for me to make any changes or ask any directors. So fine with that. So is all directors fine with their current committee assignments? Is there any directors who would like to change or be added to a committee? Given that, then I would like to just keep all committee assignments as currently slated. And so we'll move to the board reports. Basin management.
Chair, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to think through. I know you were a committee member on certain committees, and now that you're chair, you're ex officio member. So I'm just thinking out loud, thinking out loud. Are there any committees where you were once a committee member and now you're the chair, if there needs to be an adjustment there?
And
someone help me here.
No, I understand what you're saying. And it'd still be at my discretion.
Well, the way the bylaws read is as chair, you're the ex officio member of all committees, meaning there's other committee members and then you are also a member as chair. So you were a member of the finance committee before, correct?
Yes.
Any others?
Joint board leadership.
Joint board leadership.
Well, that's the chair and vice chair.
Yes.
And
so maybe you need to appoint someone to be on finance to take your seat, and then you're the ex officio. Okay. Do you know what I'm saying?
So, there'll be an opening slot for personnel and administration and financing. Are any committee board of directors interested on?
So I was chair of those two committees, or no, Mark was chair of P&A. I was chair of finance. You as chairman now could be chair of finance if you want to be chair and not ask, and that would be the directors that we would have on finance.
Sorry, I'm looking at the bylaws now. I think that might work.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it worked for me for the past 3 years. So,
I think we can stick with it.
Unless we changed the rules recently.
But if I do stay as ex officio and leave the chairs in place on the current committees, it would allow an opportunity for an additional director. Correct, Kelly? If they wanted to take part in one of those committees?
But we can't have more than 4 directors
And we're at
5.
The finance committee consists of 3 board members and the board chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're good?
Same thing with the P&A, right?
So we'll leave everything as is. And given that too, I would like to leave the current chairs in place for each of those committees. That means you.
Okay.
All right, I hope that's clear enough for everybody. And I don't know if any of us had meetings this week?
Resop did.
Resop.
Excuse me, Resop didn't. We had BMP did on January 3rd. And we went through basically groundwater areas that we discussed during our board meeting, elevation rises, and we discussed the CSIP summaries, 8 wells, and what we have available for pumping, new monitoring wells that were put in. And that was generally it on basin management. It was a short meeting. I do want to make a statement that I forgot what the date was, but we had a fish release into San Antonio. I've got a heads up from Nathan, and they released 5,000 pounds of rainbow into San Antonio, sterile rainbow. They feel that the white bass have been taken care of, so they released the rainbow trout into San Antonio and plan another release, I think the first week of February is what Nathan told me. So that was, we didn't have a RESOP meeting, but that was what they're doing down the reservoirs.
To the chair, you know, I read that in the paper too. That's kind of a big deal.
I didn't read it in the paper.
Well, that's kind of a big deal. And in fact, that's, I had questions about, which I won't bring up here because it's not agendized, but NOAA Fisheries resisted that. And so what I'm saying is those reservoirs are our reservoirs. The county has a lease to operate a park. The reservoirs are our reservoirs. I would think that anything like that, frankly, just like the Boy Scouts used to put Christmas trees in the lake for bass habitat, which was great, but they just did it, said that they thought that was okay forever. But those are our reservoirs. So what I would request in the future, that we get a heads up on that. I'm not opposed to it at all. And I think it's great, particularly since they're sterile. There's no chance of them interbreeding. And if they can survive, then obviously the white bass are not an issue anymore. But I wish we would have heard that through our own channels and not from Channel 8.
Well, Nathan got a hold of me at Parks. Yeah. So, but we'll agendize this in RESOP the end of the month. Okay. If we can, please.
I will go ahead and make notation, Chair.
We should have had a heads up on that one. Let's see, personnel and admin.
Nope, no
Yeah,
other.
finance.
We didn't have any. BMP was the only one that we had.
Okay, planning was canceled.
Yeah. Oh, planning was.
Remind everyone.
Yes, that is the 24th. So this is you're going to be there, right? All right, you're going to start the meeting. I have to be a little late. I do apologize. I had sent this in to Eva when we first got the date. Just a slight conflict with my TAMC. I'm actually leaving the chair there. Supervisor Lopez will be moving up, and as soon as that portion's done, I'll be headed over. So Matt will start off the meeting. Thank you. So that is January 24th at the WeatherTech Raceway. And thank you, Deidre, for you and your planning commission for all the work to keep this going and keep this process becoming a permanent fixture of what we do on the board.
And Chair, if I could just interject for the public's benefit, it is at the Laguna Seca Hospitality Pavilion, and there won't be an option for public participation by Zoom. So if the public wants to participate in the strategic plan workshop, they need to attend in person.
Thank you for clarifying that, Kelly. ResOps, you said there was nothing, and we already had clarification on the Joint Water Resource Board being changed to February 15th. We received information items, reservoir storage release update from staff, Peter Quick. Where's the rest of that? Correspondence was a joint letter that was referenced from our general manager, from SBWC and SBWA. That was to our agency at M1W. We'll move on to more directors' comments. Any comments from any board of directors? Ken?
I'd just like to congratulate Mr. Chair and new Mr. Vice Chairs for your willingness to serve, and thank John Bailey, the outgoing chair, because as he will tell you, if you don't already know, there's actually a little more work involved with the chairmanship than just showing up to meetings. But congratulations for that, and I'm looking forward to an interesting year for the agency.
So I like how the nominating committee puts that out there after the fact. Now, other board of directors, yes, Mike?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment regarding the Monterey County Weekly's January 11th op-ed. The title of that was Recycle Water to Supply Peninsula Raises Eyebrows from Salinas Valley Growers. When you read it, it really sounds like it's unwarranted concern from the grower community. So I just kind of wanted to put out a couple facts regarding the 2022 season. Total usage of water that season was 21,500 acre feet. Which is well within the average of what that project has been doing since 1998. But what's really interesting was the total water usage and where that water came from. And if you go back and you look during the growing season, we had some unprecedented impacts to the groundwater, which was in May, we used 1,800 acre feet of well water, which was more than the recycled water that we got. That happened in May, that happened in June, July, and August. That has never happened in the history of this project, where during the growing season, we used more well water than we used recycled water. And if you look at those averages for those months too, if you look at like April, we used 919 acre feet of well water. The average for the whole project time was 365. In May, 1,800 acre feet of well water. For the average for May, 645 of well water. And it goes on and on, 1,900, 800. So in reading this article, it sounds like the growers are just being just complaining to complain, and that there's really no concern for it. We do have a concern. There was huge impacts that year. We were running those wells 24 hours a day to refill those reservoirs so that the farmers could have water to utilize. And these are projects that the farmers have paid for. We've paid for those waters. We've paid for those projects. It's not as if these things, somebody, a benevolent water dictator is giving those waters to us. We've paid for those waters. So I just want to make it abundantly clear that there was, that year was unprecedented. And you could go back, you can make the comment and say, well, the river water wasn't there as well from the SRDF. We've had plenty of years where we had no river water, and we did not have these impacts. So that's the concern. That's why the eyebrows have been raised. And just want to thank Director Bailey for his chairmanship and your service, and looking forward to working with Director LeVar and Simas.
Thank you, Mike. Other directors?
Sure. Thank you for the nominating committee to putting that together, and thank you for Mr. Simas for taking my spot that I denied. And thank you, John, for all your work, and good luck to our next chair and vice chair. And thank you to staff for all your hard work. Thank you.
I just want to thank John for his service. It's been a good 3 years. I'm glad you're still on the board and guide us further along.
I too would like to thank all the long hours you've put in, John. You've had an interesting term, and then welcome the new incoming team, and it's only about 20 extra hours a week, so it's not bad, not bad.
great job the last 3 years. And I look forward to an exciting few years with new leadership, and the agency just continues to move forward and get better. So it's a good time. Yes.
A quick comment. Thank you for having me. And I want to thank Ara and Kelly up here on the dais that working with, well, I haven't worked with Ara for 3 years, but it's felt like 3 years. But Kelly and staff, Shauna, I've worked with you for 3 years. Giselle, it's been 35 years, I think. I don't know. And he, I know, just long, like dog years. Eva, thank you very much. Staff, we have the best staff. I will reiterate that Water Resource Agency has the best county staff there is. And thank you for your hard work. And I appreciate hard work, and I appreciate the staff. And thank you very much, and look forward to working with all of you into the years. And Matthew and Michael, I leave it in good hands. For those of you that don't know, Matthew's uncle was David Hart, and he was past chair, 7 years ago. And his family comes from an old farming company that started back in Arizona back in the 50s. So he's he's got the breeding, and he'll do a fine job as vice chair. So congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And you've done an amazing job these past few years. Given that, we'll now adjourn this meeting at 2:32 p.m. Everyone, thank you. Have a great day.